The veteran was embarrassed about not having enough money for food. Then Sammy Davis Jr. stepped in, and when the veteran realized who helped him, his reaction moved everyone to tears. It was a quiet Thursday morning in October 1987, and Sammy Davis Jr. was doing something that might have surprised his fans: grocery shopping alone at a Vons supermarket in West Hollywood. No entourage, no assistants, no security. Just Sammy, dressed in a simple cardigan sweater, slacks, and his signature glasses, pushing a small cart through the aisles like any other customer. He was picking up a few essentials: coffee, bread, some fruit, and the morning newspaper. At 62, Sammy had learned to appreciate these quiet moments of normalcy, brief escapes from the constant attention that came with being one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world. The store was moderately busy with the usual morning crowd, people grabbing breakfast items, picking up forgotten groceries, stopping by on their way to work. Sammy moved through the aisles with the same unassuming manner he tried to bring to his private life. Just another customer on a Thursday morning. When he finished shopping, Sammy headed to the checkout lanes and chose lane 4, which had only 2 people ahead of him. The first customer was already checking out, and the second was an elderly man, probably in his late 70s, wearing a worn Navy veteran baseball cap and a jacket that had clearly seen better days. The veteran had a small basket with the most basic items imaginable: a loaf of white bread, a carton of milk, a dozen eggs, and a small container of peanut butter. The kind of modest shopping you do when you're buying just enough to get through the next few days. The cashier, a young man in his early 20s named David, scanned the items with efficient, mechanical movements. "That'll be $12.47, he said, his tone professionally neutral but lacking any warmth. The elderly veteran reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet that looked like it had been with him for decades. He opened it, and Sammy could see from his position in line that the wallet was nearly empty. No bills visible, just some coins scattered in the change compartment. The man's weathered face, which had been calm a moment before, registered genuine concern as he realized his situation. "I thought I had more," the veteran said quietly, more to himself than to David. "I could have sworn I had at least $15. He began pulling out coins, quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies, and counting them carefully on the counter. His hands, which showed the telltale tremor of age, moved deliberately through the small pile of change. David waited, but his expression showed he'd encountered this situation before and wasn't particularly patient about it. Other customers were beginning to line up behind Sammy, and the cashier was clearly more concerned about keeping the line moving than showing compassion for an elderly customer's predicament. The veteran counted slowly, his concentration absolute, as he tried to make every coin count. 8, 9, 10, 11, 50, 12. He reached the end of his coins and recounted to make sure. $12.37. He looked up at David, and Sammy could see embarrassment beginning to color the man's weathered features. "I'm short," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, I thought I had more." David sighed audibly. "Sir, you're 10 cents short. You'll need to put something back." The veteran looked down at his modest groceries spread on the counter. Bread, milk, eggs, peanut butter, the absolute basics. Nothing extravagant, nothing that could be considered a luxury, just food. "The peanut butter," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. "I'll put that back." David reached for the container to void it from the transaction, but the veteran stopped him with a raised hand. "Wait," he said, his voice getting smaller. "How much is just the bread?" $1.49, David replied with barely concealed impatience. The veteran did mental calculations, trying to figure out what combination of items he could afford with his $12.37. The embarrassment on his face was deepening with each second, and Sammy noticed that his hands had developed a more pronounced tremor. "And the milk?" $3.29. Behind Sammy, Someone in line muttered something under their breath about people holding up the checkout process. The comment was quiet, but not quiet enough to avoid being heard by the veteran, whose shoulders sagged slightly at the implicit criticism. Sammy watched this scene unfold with growing recognition of what he was witnessing. This wasn't someone being careless with money or trying to buy items beyond their means. This was a man trying to purchase basic food and coming up short by less than 11 cents. The worn Navy veteran cap wasn't a fashion statement. The careful coin counting wasn't about being overly frugal. This was someone living on what was obviously a very fixed income that didn't quite stretch far enough. The veteran made his painful decision. "I'll just take the bread and milk," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Put the eggs and peanut butter back." As David began voiding items from the transaction, Sammy quietly stepped forward and placed his own items on the belt behind the veteran's remaining groceries. Then he spoke, his voice calm and clear enough for both the veteran and David to hear, but not loud enough to draw attention from other customers. "Ring it all up together," Sammy said simply, "his items and mine." The veteran turned around, confused. His eyes met Sammy's, but behind the glasses and without the stage makeup and performance attire, recognition didn't come immediately. "I'm sorry, what?" the veteran asked. "Ring up everything," Sammy said to David, gesturing to include the eggs and peanut butter the cashier was about to remove. "All his groceries plus my items, one transaction." David looked uncertain, glancing between Sammy and the veteran. "Sir, I'm not sure." "I'm just buying groceries," Sammy interrupted gently but firmly. "We're both customers. Ring it all up together." The veteran stared at Sammy, processing what was happening. "Sir, I can't let you do that. I can't pay you back. I don't have." "I'm not asking you to pay me back," Sammy said quietly. "I'm just buying my groceries. Yours happen to be in front of mine, so they're going through together." The veteran stood there, his embarrassment now mixing with disbelief, gratitude, and confusion about how to respond to this unexpected kindness from a stranger. "But this is very generous, and I really should. You should let the man ring up your groceries," Sammy said with a gentle smile. "That's what you should do." David, who had been watching this exchange with growing curiosity, suddenly seemed to recognize something. He looked at Sammy more carefully, and his eyes widened slightly. He knew who he was looking at, but professional discretion kept him from saying anything. He simply nodded and began scanning all the items: the veteran's bread, milk, eggs, and peanut butter, plus Sammy's coffee, fruit, and newspaper. As David worked, Sammy turned to the veteran and asked a question that came naturally to him whenever he met someone of that generation. "What branch did you serve in?" The veteran, still processing the kindness he was receiving, responded automatically to a question he'd answered thousands of times over the decades. "Navy, Pacific Theater, 1943 to 1946. "Thank you for your service," Sammy said simply, and the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. The veteran nodded, but his attention was still focused on the fact that a complete stranger was paying for his groceries. "Sir, this is incredibly kind, but I really feel like I should—" "You should take your groceries and have a good day," Sammy interrupted gently. "That's what you should do." David finished scanning everything and announced the total: $22.15. Sammy handed over his credit card without hesitation. As the transaction processed, other customers in line and in neighboring checkout lanes had begun to notice something unusual was happening, though most couldn't hear the specific conversation. David handed Sammy his receipt and card, then prepared a separate bag for the veteran's items. As he handed the bag to the elderly man, the veteran looked directly at Sammy for the first time since the interaction began. Really looked at him. There was a moment of studying, of recognition slowly building. The distinctive voice, even in quiet conversation, the mannerisms, the way he carried himself. And then, despite the casual clothes and the everyday setting, recognition clicked into place. "Wait," the veteran said, his voice catching slightly. You're Sammy Davis Jr." Sammy gave a small nod and a modest smile. "Just picking up some groceries." What happened next moved everyone within earshot to witness it. The veteran's eyes filled with tears, and his voice, which had been embarrassed and quiet when dealing with his shortage of money, came out thick with emotion. "I can't believe this. I mean, thank you, not just for this," he gestured to the bag of groceries, "but for everything you've done. Your performances, your music, you got me through some really difficult times." The veteran paused, collecting himself, then continued. "When I came back from the Pacific, things were different. It wasn't easy adjusting, but I'd listen to your records, watch you on television, and it reminded me that you could face adversity and still find joy. That you could be knocked down and get back up with dignity." Sammy listened intently, his expression growing more serious and compassionate. "And here you are," the veteran continued, "helping a stranger in a grocery store. Not because anyone's watching or because there are cameras around, just because you saw someone who needed help." By now, everyone in the immediate area had stopped what they were doing. David, the cashier, the customers in line behind Sammy, people in neighboring checkout lanes, the store manager who had wandered over to see what was causing the delay. They were all watching this moment unfold between an entertainment legend and a Navy veteran. The veteran, whose name was Robert Chen, wiped his eyes. "I'm sorry for getting emotional. It's just, I live on my Navy pension and Social Security. Most days it's enough, but sometimes when bills come due and the check hasn't arrived yet, days like today happen. And I was standing here counting coins, feeling like I'd somehow failed, like I wasn't managing my life properly." His voice broke slightly. "And then you stepped in, and now I'm standing here, talking to Sammy Davis Jr. in a grocery store, and I just can't believe this is real." "You didn't fail at anything," Sammy said firmly. "You served your country with honor. You're dealing with a system that doesn't always take care of its veterans the way it should. That's not failure on your part. That's just reality being harder than it ought to be." An older woman who had been waiting in line behind Sammy stepped forward. She had clearly heard the entire exchange and been moved by it. Without saying a word, she handed Robert a $20 bill. "For next time," she said simply. "My husband served in Korea. Someone helped him once when he needed it. This is me paying that forward." Robert tried to protest, but she gently closed his hand around the money. Then something remarkable happened. Other customers began approaching, not crowding Robert or making a spectacle, but quietly offering assistance. A man in a business suit pulled out his wallet and handed Robert a $50 bill. A woman with 2 young children added a 20. The teenage bagger, who couldn't have been making much more than minimum wage, pulled out a $10 bill from his own pocket. Within 3 minutes, Robert was standing at the checkout counter with over $150 in cash that strangers had handed him, plus his groceries paid for by Sammy Davis Jr. in a grocery store that had transformed from a place of embarrassment into a demonstration of overwhelming human kindness. David, who had been watching this unfold with increasing emotion, reached under his register and pulled out a Vons gift card. "This has $25 on it," he said, though Sammy suspected the young man was paying for it himself rather than using any store fund. "For next time you're shopping." Robert couldn't speak. He stood there holding his groceries, $150 in cash, and a gift card, surrounded by strangers who had just reminded him that kindness and generosity still existed in the world. Sammy picked up his own bag of groceries and started to head toward the exit, but Robert called after him. "Mr. Davis," he said, his voice still thick with emotion, "I'll never forget this. Never." Sammy turned back and looked at Robert with the same warm expression he'd shown throughout the encounter. "Just take care of yourself, Robert, and thank you again for your service to this country." As Sammy left the store, the other customers gradually dispersed, returning to their shopping or completing their transactions. But the atmosphere in the store had been fundamentally changed. People were making eye contact with each other, smiling, engaging in the kind of human connection that doesn't usually happen in grocery stores. David told his manager what had happened, and by that afternoon, the story had reached the store's district office. By that evening, Vaughn's had established a Veterans Assistance Program at that location, a discreet fund that employees could access to help veterans who came up short at checkout. Robert used the money people had given him, not just for food, but to get ahead on his rent and utilities, giving him a financial cushion he hadn't had in years. He became a regular at that Vaughn's, and each time he shopped there, employees and customers who remembered that day would greet him warmly. The few customers who had witnessed the interaction didn't publicize it or seek attention for themselves. They simply carried the memory of what they'd seen, a moment when celebrity status was used not for personal gain, but for quiet, dignified assistance to someone in need. 6 months later, Robert Chen passed away peacefully in his sleep. At his memorial service, over 40 people attended, including several who had been in that grocery store checkout line. His nephew, who delivered the eulogy, mentioned the Vaughn's incident specifically. "Uncle Robert told me that day changed how he viewed his final years," the nephew said. He'd been feeling forgotten, like his service didn't matter to anyone anymore. And then a store full of strangers, led by Sammy Davis Jr., reminded him that he mattered, that we all matter, and that there are still good people in the world who will step up when someone needs help. When Sammy heard about Robert's passing through a mutual acquaintance, he sent flowers to the memorial service. The card read simply, "It was an honor to meet you that day. Thank you for everything you gave to this country, Sammy." The story became part of local West Hollywood lore. The day Sammy Davis Jr. paid for a veteran's groceries and sparked a chain reaction of kindness that lasted far beyond that single morning. The Vaughn's still maintains its Veterans Assistance Fund, named the Robert Chen Memorial Fund, and it has helped hundreds of veterans over the years since. Today, when people share this story, they emphasize the lesson that Robert himself articulated to his nephew. We're all just trying to get through our days, and some days are harder than others. On those difficult days, the difference between despair and hope can be as small as someone stepping up and saying, "I've got this. You're not alone." That's what real character looks like, not on a stage or a movie screen, but in a grocery store checkout line on a Thursday morning, when no one is watching except the people who matter most, fellow human beings who could use a reminder that kindness still exists in the world. If this incredible story of unexpected generosity, veterans' dignity honored rather than diminished, and how one act of kindness can inspire an entire community moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this with anyone who's ever struggled to make ends meet, anyone who's served their country, or anyone who needs a reminder that small acts of human kindness can have enormous impact. Have you witnessed or experienced unexpected generosity when you needed it most? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more true stories about the power of compassion.